past couple years, I've been tricking people into thinking I'm some sort of VFX genius just by using some simple tricks right here in Premiere. Now, to be honest, I'm no Grant Fletcher, but with a little planning on set and just a couple clicks in post, I've turned this into this and this into this. So let's jump into this tutorial on masking, and I'll show you just how powerful and easy it is. All right, so here we have our footage. We have shot number one, which was this slow motion shot of Aiden essentially, jumping backwards onto a pile of mattresses that just so happened to be in the desert. Just kidding. And then we have this clean version of the shots, which is called a plate, where essentially we, captured this first, got the take that we liked, and then removed the mattresses out of the shot to get this perfectly matching moment, right? So we can scrub through and see that the horizons are the same, the clouds are a little different, but that doesn't really matter for this. And generally, this all lines up perfectly. Now, this is where you can work with your director and your DP to really be able to pull these shots off in post, because we had to make sure that this camera was locked on a tripod and that no one touched anything between takes to make this as simple as possible in post. But since we got it right on set, the effect is super simple to pull off here. So we can actually go ahead and drag our main footage layer up to the second layer, and we can take this plate. We're actually just going to copy and paste this to duplicate it across the entire duration of our main shots. Then we can just click on our top layer, select the pen tool under our opacity settings, and essentially we're just going to try to get these mattresses out of the frame by just kind of drawing around them. So we're going to go down here to avoid where his feet starts. We're going to click all the way to the outside, click down, and across, and then back up to sort of close the loop. And this will create our mask. Now, it's not exactly what we wanted. I didn't, exactly want a shot of mattresses in the middle of the desert, as cool as that might be. So instead, we're going to invert our selection just by clicking invert right here. And just like that, you can kind of see the sort of base effect is that we have Aiden floating in the middle of the sky. It looks super cool. But if we kind of zoom in, or kind of scrub through, we can kind of see a couple problems. So his feet get cut off here. And then when he falls down to the mat, we're kind of seeing like a weird corner. Let's kind of just work to soften this up a little bit. So we're first going to choose this feather option here. And by sort of dragging this up, it essentially changes the blur on the outside, right? So by clicking on the mask, we'll see how that's actually being affected. It's kind of changing how those two clips are going to blend together. That's a little bit better, maybe a little too far. Then we can go to our expansion and kind of just do this right here, which will just kind of widen the circle. And that's already feeling a ton better. Now, if we were, really paying attention, we would come back to the beginning of this clip and realize that his feet are getting, cut off here. So we could click back on the mask and change our selection to just kind of be a little bit more specific. That's feeling a lot better. And then same thing, his shoulders kind of disappearing. So we could go in and tweak, make all of our little selections just perfect without revealing the mattresses. But for the sake of our example right now, that's feeling really dope. And this is kind of our hero moment anyway, before he even gets to that. Now, this in and of itself is an amazing effect. We could totally just leave it here and it would be a really special feeling. But to sell it even further, I want to add some additional motion to this, sort of composition as a whole. So what we're going to do is we're going to nest these clips together. That creates one unit out of these two, shots now seamlessly blended together. And if we ever wanted to change anything in there, by the way, we just double click and we have access to, edit the original stuff. But if we come back to our main sequence here, we can now affect just this entire nested sequence together, right? So I had this idea to kind of punch in a little bit, and I want to kind of create some sort of motion with Aiden where instead of, him being the thing that's changing and everything else is kind of static, I want to kind of almost feel like the earth is spinning around him to sort of increase that weightless feeling, right? So we're just going to click on this, and I want to kind of get his back. I want to sort of flatten him out where he's kind of like flat with the earth here or flat with the horizon. And then we're going to set a rotation keyframe. We can drag this back a little bit, actually. We're going to move forward to like right here. And we can set another rotation keyframe to be the opposite direction where, his back is going to be, flat the whole time. Maybe we go a little less. We can shift this up a little bit. We could keyframe all of this, actually, if we wanted to. And just by hitting play right there, we get this really interesting effect where the whole world is kind of turning and he's kind of like, it feels like everything is changing all at once. Like if we got a way more expensive, way more difficult shot, but it's all just because we're using these basic keyframes and this basic mask tool right here in Premiere. If you've ever seen the movie Get Out, there's this concept of the sunken place where it's sort of like this hopeless feeling, and I wanted to kind of like create the same concept for this music video. But we had a very limited budget for this, and so we had to figure out a different way to do it. We decided to wrap our entire basement in this black fabric. We, blocked off all the windows, but I knew that I could use masking to kind of pull off the same effect. So we're gonna click on this shot, and the first thing I actually wanna do is scale it down. And when I do that, you're gonna see that this footage is very much in like log mode, right? So even though this was black, it's kind of showing up as more of a gray now. And we can fix that by just going to our effects panel, typing in Lumetri. We're gonna drag that on. And we're actually gonna go down to our curve setting, and we're gonna go and just we're basically just trying to isolate the black areas of this shot. So I'm trying to get the black border to sort of disappear, as much of this as possible for it to just sort of like feel natural. That's feeling a ton better. Sort of really pull this even down even more. I don't want it to feel crushed, but that's feeling a ton better. Obviously, we still have these hot spots on the ground, but we're gonna fix that in just a second. And kind of tweaking this, we could tweak all day on this stuff, but I do want to just boost the saturation a little bit, and we can kind of give it a little bit of a tint, add some skin tone back, maybe a little bit of this, make it a little colder, and then just boost the contrast even more. And there we go. So we've got as much of the black sort of removed just by using our curves and contrast, and we've got it nice and colored there just for our basic purposes here. And then the next thing we're going to do, obviously, is use our mask technique to get rid of this final bit of gray that's on the ground. So if we play this back, this is already feeling good, but you can definitely tell it's just girl on the ground in basement. So let's click back again on our pen tool, and we're just going to select all this area that we can, where, hopefully avoiding her jacket and all that fun stuff. We can actually go above this. So we're going to try to click through here. We're going to avoid her feet, but try to get through all of this. And then again, click on the outsides and back around to close the loop. And then we're going to invert to make sure that we are just masking out the right stuff. So right there, feeling a ton better. We've got little moments where, if we were to zoom in, we're going to see little stuff, like the ground here. So if we wanted to get really fancy, we could kind of pull this up, but I don't want to, eliminate her hair here. So all of that is feeling pretty good. And I'd say that's pretty good for now. So let's go ahead and click off of that. We can definitely feather this a little bit just to make sure that it's not too hard at any point. And right off the bat, we're feeling pretty awesome. It's feeling very weightless. But because of how sort of, flat this is, because there's not a lot of motion, it definitely just feels like we have like a stock clip here. So I want to take that further by sort of introducing some foreground element and making her seem really small. And sort of, by doing those two things, we're going to immediately sort of create a much better feeling. So let's go ahead and scale this down. We're going to sort of get her to feel a little bit smaller, so we can have some more context of this weightless feeling. I actually want to go over here. I just feel like it would be cool to flip this shot. It just feels better with her hair on the right for some reason, but that means that our mask is a little messed up. So we're going to click back and fix some of that just by dragging our points around. We'll kind of just tweak a little bit as we go. That's better. And now we can kind of just like place her in this weightless, feeling, but it definitely, okay, let's get rid of that beginning where she's like prepping, and we'll wait for the hair to be blowing there. And that's feeling a ton better, but it still just feels like, she's this little stock footage clip. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sort of introduce some foreground. And I wanted to sort of find these particles that sort of made it feel like she was in this context of like a spacey kind of feeling. If you look at like Stranger Things, they use this, or a lot of music videos uses this. And it's a pretty simple concept. In this case, what I found was it's actually snow particles. And I like the way that they're just floating. It just kind of has like a sort of organic texture to it in the movement, in the way that the particle feels, all of that. So we're going to take it. We're actually going to drop it right on top here. We're going to take our opacity, change the blending mode to screen so that it's sort of sitting there and we're feeling better because we have some context. But if you notice, it feels as if, both the snow is falling, which means that it doesn't feel like Jillian is falling. It almost feels like she's going up. So we're just going to change that by clicking on the snow layer, and we're going to rotate this 180 degrees. And when we play that back now, it almost kind of gives context to the motion that we're trying to create around her, right? It feels like because these particles are floating up, she must be falling down. And so even if we just stopped right there, we'd have a much better feeling shot. But let's kind of push things even further. And a couple things that I'm noticing are her hair feels really bright, and it's kind of making it feel extra, sort of like we just sort of dropped her and this snow footage together. So let's go ahead and fix that. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna move this snow out of the way for just a second. I'm gonna go over here and create a black video, which is just a black solid. We're gonna drag this right on top of her, and obviously it's just gonna go black. But when we scale this down, and I can actually just click this to sort of see where it's landing, we're gonna rotate a little bit and a little less. And then when I grab this fast blur, I can drag this on top of the black video, and I can start to just blur this out a little bit. And I'm using essentially, because her background is solid black, I can pull this off. So I'm essentially using this black video as a way to just get rid of the sort of like shiny hair thing that we're experiencing here, right? So if I turn this on and off, you kind of see this like softer edge where, it feels like there's not as much light coming from the side, which would be unnatural in the setting that we're trying to create. So that's feeling a little bit better. We can kind of dial this down a little bit, and then bring this over here, pull it back so it's a little bit more natural feeling. And overall, that's feeling pretty solid. And let's come back to our comp. That's feeling good. Now, if we nest these things together, we now have this as one controllable clip that's, got all of our effects nicely baked in. We can drag this snow back on top, and that's feeling really nice. But the reason why we're going to nest this is because I want that black bit to be attached to her hair when we start to animate this clip. And so let's take this, and we're just going to kind of accentuate that motion even further like we did with the shot of Aiden. And we're essentially just going to go back to the beginning of this clip. We're going to pull her position up. We are going to rotate it a little bit this way, sort of to the left. Then we're going to set a keyframe on both the position and rotation. And we're going to swipe to the right here, and we're going to rotate in the other direction to almost feel like she, lost control of her sort of free fall. And we're going to drop her down even further. So this might be way too fast, but actually it's feeling pretty good. So right there, it literally feels like she's falling through the sky. Like she's kind of like weightless, and that all of these, particles are sort of shooting up around her in slow motion. So that's feeling really sick. Again, we could totally leave it there, but let's take it even further. The next thing I want to do is sort of introduce these light hits, right? So I want to really sort of sell this concept that light is above her and that she's falling away from it. And so we're going to do a couple things here. I want to kind of just grab this as sort of like a particle. And again, we'll use the blending mode, maybe lighten. Now we'll use screen here. We'll kind of just really dial this down and find a couple shots that are just that little bit right there. We'll kind of use that. We'll fade it in, kind of just get some of these little twinkles going. That's nice. Kind of just adds like this sense of like a lens blur or, something like that. We'll dial this down. We could even crush that with some effects in a second, but overall that's feeling pretty good. I'd say that's about as much as we want. Then we can come back here to, let's say it's this light hit right here. And I like this because it's got kind of like this, almost like a lens flare type concept. And if we drag this in, we can start pulling this down so we have more room to play. This is a 4K clip, so we actually have some room to play here, but we can rotate this, and I kind of want this beam just facing straight down. So we are going to set this to, let's set this to screen. And you can see that we've got kind of like some issues starting to pop up here. So we'll fix all this in just a second. But that's feeling like generally a pretty good thing. Now, let's first of all fix the way that this all feels. So we're going to scale this up so that it's kind of feeling like it's filling the frame. And then the first thing that you're going to notice is that Jillian's mask is now falling apart because all these different light elements are sort of interacting with it. To fix that, we're going to move everything up one layer. We're going to go back to our project, grab another black video, and just bring it underneath. And the next thing we're going to do is actually drag a new instance of Lumetri onto our nested sequence with Jillian in it here, because clearly we haven't gone black enough. So let's drag it onto here. We're going to change our basic correction and just boost up that contrast until you can kind of see it there, until that black, disappears and she is again, weightless in this sort of like sunken place. Now, if that was feeling too sort of contrasty overall, we can also come back here, create an adjustment layer, and remember that we can always create an adjustment layer that sits over everything in our timeline to really sell the effects and not be sort of too, crushed or too contrasty. So we could drop that on. We could go down to our creative tabs. We can go to faded film, which now that it's sitting on top of everything, it's going to make everything feel soft, which is really nice. And we're getting this really cool effect where it feels like she's like, falling in the middle of nowhere. I kind of want to like create a moment out of this where it's almost like a transition out. And so we're going to essentially do this. And then that's going to be our out point, right? So let's actually cut this and we can move this like a few frames to the right. So it kind of becomes like this transition. That's maybe too far. We'll just nudge it like 2 frames to the left. And that's feeling a lot better. So next thing, we're going to fade this in a little bit so it's not so, obvious that it comes on. That's feeling really nice. And then let's just add one more, leak here for good measure. This is like an anamorphic one, but it's got some really cool kind of vibes going on here. And I like the way that this will help, sell this a little bit more. So we're actually just going to layer this on and we're going to pull our adjustment layer back up. We're going to take this light leak, again, kind of shift it over. We're going to rotate some stuff. We'll take it -90 so that that flare is kind of coming straight down. This could work, set this to screen and we can kind of just start really dialing in, whether or not we want this effect to be there. But let's kind of scrub through and see if that concept works. So even if it's just that little bit right there, that's a nice little touch that just kind of helps sell this whole concept even more. So let's just kind of play with the specific pieces that we want. And just like this, we're getting a nice little vibe, maybe not that bright part. So we can kind of just dial this down and dial this up so it kind of fades in. Just like that. So some stock clips, girl falling in a basement, and just a simple mask. And we've got this really, really beautiful effect that we're able to pull off at a super low budget. The power of masking is just insane. And when you know these simple tricks in Premiere, you can pull off these crazy high budget concepts, just with a couple clicks. As always, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. And until next time, happy editing.